worked at Walmart when I was 19 for a little income while going to college. I worked overnights as a shift supervisor. This all occurred sometime in late fall. Nights were quiet and slow, mostly stacking shelves and putting up tags. One night, as I walked in for my shift, there was a woman leaning against the counter, chatting with the cashier. "Who is he? Why does he have a hood on?" she asked the cashier, pointing at me. Very obviously wired. I paid no mind and went into the back to begin opening procedures. I gave her a curious glance. She had on a flowery, old-fashioned velvet Edwardian hat on, right out of the 1920s. Strange. She acted paranoid, but I was still tired, so I ignored. Hours passed before I walked back onto the floor around 1 a.m. Out of my peripherals, I noticed a woman seated at the pharmacy with a huge rimmed hat, faded auburn coat, and large, thick glasses. I looked up and saw that it was that woman, and the pharmacy was long closed. I noticed that she was holding several bags, and passively assumed she was waiting for a ride, but she'd been there for 3 hours. Odd. The cashier told me that the woman was making her extremely uncomfortable, and that she'd been asking if I was an undercover police officer. I assumed she was harmless, lonely old lady, so I decided to approach and engage her in a casual conversation in order to feel her out, and hopefully calm her down. "Hi, is there anything I can help you with?" The conversation began pleasantly enough. We exchanged necessities, and she told me about her life. She mentioned she was married to an oil tycoon years back, and described how she owned several lavish homes up and down the England coast, how she used to travel to Paris, France, and Greece on a yearly basis, all the while fiddling with something inside of her massive purse. She talked about her son and other family, which now I don't recall. Despite my nodding, I tried really hard to conceal my skepticism, especially after mentioning that her first husband was a famous vaudevillian in New York. She'd have to be about 110 years old for this to be true. All her over-the-top stories forced me to start examining her clothes. Her boots looked cheap and were coming unstitched. Her hair was wild and matted, dyed a bright red fading upwards to gray, face weathered and full of lines and cracks like a calving glacier. Needless to say, she looked like she'd been through hell. Nothing spelled socialite to me. In fact, it was the opposite. I got called up front and momentarily excused myself. I came back to her and continued with some small chatter. I listened to her blabber on while I called her a cab. But things began to go down a different path, saying things like, "My neighbors are trying to kill me. Oh, that's no good. They killed all of my cats." Just all these bizarre things. "They've been spraying bug spray in my basement for 14 years. The CIA spies on me from Britain. They use a giant TV. My neighbors put their garbage cans outside to block their transmission signals. They know what I'm thinking. I know they're closing in." After all that, she began to whisper and signaled for me to come closer. "Are those girls up front in the FBI? It's okay if they are." I was in a mental tailspin before getting called up front once more. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. I took care of whatever needed doing at the registers and returned. I walked back to the pharmacy area and found that the woman had disappeared. I returned to the front and asked when she left. What? Left? She never left, the cashier explained. She must be walking around, I told her. Please find her. She creeps me out, the cashier said. I walked up and down every aisle, but couldn't find her. I returned to the cashier and asked if the woman had left, and I missed it. Nope, nobody had left. What the hell? She must have went into the back to the bathroom. A bathroom only for employees. Nope. I looked everywhere. She wasn't in the bathrooms, and the office door was locked. So were all the other doors in the store. I was confused. There was only one other place she could be. The door was open to the back storage room, and from there, the stairs leading to the basement. The cab company wasn't coming through, so all that was left were the police. But I had to find her first. As I passed through the back hallway, I noticed that her 2 full bags, along with her purse, were spread out across stacked boxes of cereal. I noticed that her purse was opened up widely. Whatever she was tinkering with earlier, she must have left it out. She, however, was nowhere to be found. She didn't just evaporate through the walls, and the basement was all that was left. I opened the door to go downstairs, a move I was most certainly not very enthusiastic about. In fact, I was downright creeped out. The basement? Hello? Hello? I shouted. Nothing. This was getting tense, and frankly, a little scary. I remained upstairs as I called the police. They'd be sending out a cruiser immediately, so I called the front of the store and told her to call me over the PA system when they got here with the code words for a cash pickup at the register when it would exceed a certain limit. And from there, I proceeded down the stairs. The basement was dimly lit and large, used to store the majority of our back stock. It also was the location for receiving for when we'd get in trucks. Once you go down the staircase, the room opens up to the right. On the right-hand side, running from the back up to the front receiving door, was an automated belt used to move product as it would come in. To the left were large shelves, usually fully stocked with anything from 12 packs of soda to detergent and canned food. I turned the corner and looked directly down the room, and I saw nobody. Hello? Hello? I called out once more. When you first enter the basement, you can only see the side of shelves facing you. They were massive and usually so stocked that you couldn't see to the other side. The side where she most likely was. I broke into a cold sweat. A clicking noise, followed by a shuffling sound once more. I tiptoed to the dark lane of shelves and peeked my head around the corner, very carefully, just a few inches. She didn't notice me, but I noticed her, crouching down in the shadows, holding something long and slim in her hand, about 10 feet away in the dark. I was absolutely frozen in terror. I couldn't move, my gaze fixated on that woman. I could see she was no longer wearing her hat, her wild hair jutting out on all sides like some demented clown, the only silver of light illuminating only the tips of her blood-red curls. And then came from her mouth in a whisper, "Shh. No, he's with the police." And then she gasped and began slowly inching her way towards me, shuffling across the dirty concrete floors on her hands and knees. She was crawling. I pulled back and tried to quietly tiptoe back to the stairs. Those few seconds of walking backwards, just watching the corner of the storage shelves waiting for her to appear, felt like eternity. I noticed that whatever was in her hand could have been anything from a long screwdriver to a knife. I snuck behind the corner and ran up the stairs. Before I reached the top, I looked behind me to the bottom. I could hear her knees scraping against the floor as she drew closer, her incoherent mumbling to an invisible person drawing nearer to the front of the stairs. Suddenly, over the speakers, Code 4 on Register 1, I pushed open the door and ran up to the front to be greeted by 2 officers. I explained the situation, which was made only more tense by the sound of the alarm. "You say she's downstairs?" "Yeah, back there," I pointed. The officers marched ahead of me as I guided them to the back. Then as we made it through the entrance, the second officer shot me a concerned look and told me to stay there. "Hello?" The officer audibly yelled. Ma'am, are you down there?" I heard the door to the basement creaking open and then shut behind the officers. Muffled yells in the form of questions, and then, and by God, I'll never become a cop after what happened next. The men began to scream, "You need to stay where you are." I made my way around the corner and to the top of the steps and peered down. Right there at the bottom of the stairs, both officers had her on the ground, one with a knee in her back as she thrashed and wailed. She turned from a gentle old lady to a possessed lunatic like a switch was turned in her brain. 2 more officers walked into the back, and I motioned for them to go downstairs as the woman screamed. "I knew it. I knew you were all coming after me." The officer was wiping blood from his face. She slashed him with a box cutter. He was bleeding so ferociously, I had to bring him towels into the bathroom. Eventually, an ambulance came. It took 2 officers and a taser to take this woman down, whom I later found out was a local paranoid schizophrenic who had no children and was living in some sort of halfway house. None of which I've mentioned so far was the most frightening part. Once they brought her up to the front in handcuffs, she shot me the most terrifyingly evil look anyone has ever given me and said, "I would have killed you." That last sentence has given me nightmares ever since. They've continued to persist, week after week, year after year. I've never seen or heard about the woman again, but still, in my nightmares, whenever I might be in the dream, I always have a gut feeling that this woman is lurking. Sometimes behind me, sometimes just on the other side of the window, looking into my living room with a retractable razor in her hand, waiting to slice my eyes open. I simply can't shake the idea that had I had made even the slightest noise when I was in that basement, she would have jumped to her feet and I would have been on the receiving end of a switchblade. And it absolutely could have been so. When I was in college, I was out and about with my then boyfriend. We had gone to dinner, then went to Walmart to get some typical college food so we could survive a Sunday in. I was dressed up in a casual dressy fit. We decided to split up while we shopped, split apart maybe to do some quicker shopping, but I don't remember the exact reason why. I was wandering the grocery aisles when I noticed this girl who was about my age. In a friendly manner, we casually smiled at each other and continued on shopping. It didn't seem weird at first, but I kept noticing her in the same aisle as me, and a big, muscular man was never far behind us. Eventually, I texted my boyfriend and asked where he was and continued on shopping. Next thing I know, the girl approaches me and says how she loves my jacket. I say thanks, it's Maurice's, and try to move on. She stops me and says something along the lines of, "Hey, you look like you're my age and seem really nice." She then said something about, "I just moved here for a new job and company my friends and I are starting," and she tried to ask me questions about where I was from. However, I was vague and untrusting with what I said, noticing this isn't normal. Then she said, "I'm looking for more people like you and I to work for our company. It's kind of a warehouse job and I would love for you to be one of our bookkeepers. You should give me your number." And then I replied with, "That is so nice for you to offer me a job, but I'm not really a desk person and I love the job that I have right now." She said, "That's a bummer. I thought we might work really well together. Well, would you want to give me your number so we can hang out? I would love to have a friend who can show me around the city." I realized that I wasn't getting out of this situation until my boyfriend showed up or I gave her my number. Eventually, I rattled off a fake number and said, "Hey, I'll catch you later, I gotta go." Then I walked away, praying my boyfriend would be near so we can get the hell out of there. While I was looking for him and trying to call him, the girl called up to me and said, "I tried to call you, but it said the number was out of service." And as I tried to come up with a quick excuse and say, "Maybe you typed it in wrong," she saw that my iPhone was unlocked and in my hand. She quickly snatched it and called herself on it. I was so flustered and mad at her that I snatched my phone back right when my boyfriend came around the corner. He instantly recognized that something was up and said we needed to go. When the girl saw him approach me, she looked so disappointed to see him and stopped trying to interact with me. We ended up buying nothing and leaving. That night we called our parents and the police. The police said they didn't think it was anything ill-intended, but I was sure it was probably trafficking. I was going to switch my phone number because I was so scared. I blocked them and turned off all location access on my phone. I was too scared to go anywhere alone for a while. I even told my coach so she knew. A couple days later, I got a text from a random number. It was the girl. She sent a picture of my best friend who was out drinking downtown with some of her other friends. The text said, "I met your best friend. She gave me your number because I told her I was looking for new friends. She showed me a picture of you, and I said, what a coincidence. I met her the other day and lost her number when I got a new phone." About 2 minutes later, I got a text from my best friend that said, "I gave your number to a girl who wants to make friends around here and is looking for people to join her business. And since I moved this week, I thought of you." I immediately freaked out that she was with her and told her to get away and not leave alone with her. I stayed up worried until my friend got home. She said she was fine. Otherwise, I would have gone to pick her up. The next day, my best friend apologized and told me to block her number. My friend and her group tried to ditch her, but she kept showing up at the bars they were at. She said the girl was relentless and texted her all night trying to get my friend to go hang out at her place. My best friend also said that when she asked about the business, the girl couldn't give her many details other than that it was at a warehouse somewhere, would pay her great, and in town, and if she wanted a tour of it, she would take her. We never heard from this girl again. Today I was listening to a podcast, and they mentioned different sex trafficking tactics. 2 were vague jobs, where they would pay you well but needed you to come meet them to give you more information, and a so-called new-to-town girl who desperately needs new friends. I've been thinking about this all morning, and I am glad I felt uncomfortable and my friend didn't go with this girl. But I am mostly mad the cops ignored my concern and said it wasn't nothing. I hope they wrote down the tip that night, but doubt they did. Hello, my name is Rosalia. I was 13 years old in 2004 when this all happened. I remember seeing missing people posters on those charts, but I had never thought I'd see what I saw on one. I was getting ready to go grocery shopping with my mom. My mom was a single mother. I was the only child. And when I was done, we drove to the Walmart that was 20 minutes away from our house. We arrived and went inside. Once me and my mom went shopping, I noticed the missing people chart. I went to check it out, but I was frightened, pale, and my jaw dropped to the floor. I had seen myself on the chart. I thought someone was messing with me or something. I wanted to show my mom, but I forgot she was still shopping somewhere in the store. I had left without telling her. I had started shaking violently at this point. I searched around the store for my mom, and once I found her, I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. I grabbed her hand and walked to the chart and pointed to my photo. My mom laughed it off and said it must have been a joke because I've been with her my entire life, but I believed her for a little until I thought to myself, I've never seen my father at all. I asked my mother about my father, and she told me he died before I was born. But I knew it wasn't true, because she had told me that he left her way before. It's the one where she knows she's been caught. When me and my mom arrived back home, she told me to go to my room randomly. I was still in shock about everything that had happened, so I listened to her and went to my room. I heard loud noises in the kitchen, but didn't think much of it. My mom came into my room and gave me some sort of rice and chicken. It tasted different, but that's when I passed out. I woke up in the back of my mom's car. I saw my mom driving. We were driving in the middle of nowhere. Every time she looked back to see if I was still passed out, I would pretend to be passed out. My phone was still on me, but back in 2004, I still had a flip phone, so the quality was bad. I put it back into my pocket and pretended to be passed out. When I heard my mom stop the car and open my door, she dragged me out of the car to a field, my back being scratched constantly by small tree branches, rocks, etc. She dragged me into the nearby woods and left me there on the ground. She was walking back to the car and drove off. I quickly grabbed my phone and called the police. Me being so young and scared, I felt as if I didn't have any proof or that she didn't actually hurt me, so they just picked me up. Not to get into too much detail, but I'm in a much better situation now. I still wonder if I have actual family out there, or was she my actual mom? I don't know if she actually got caught or if she died from old age. She was about 64 when this happened, so I wouldn't be surprised if she died. That's my story.